What's up, Benji Kelley?
What's going on, Mark? Good to see you.
You too, brother. I know we've been trying to do this for a minute, and I'm so glad we're finally able to get it done. You look great, brother. Things going well?
Going really well. Yeah, no complaints. It's finally getting to be a good temperature around here these days. It's been a cold winter.
It has been cold. It feels like spring though right now. It's like 70 today here in Alabama. And you're not Charlotte, you're Chapel Hill. Right. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. And I was thinking the other day about how we know each other. It's really kind of an interesting story. So I remember meeting you when I came to you at your previous church.
Right.
And we did a little video for Fellowship Adventures, which is obviously coming up in a couple of weeks. Their Well Digger event, which we're working on that again this year. And, but you were one of their testimonials talking about that ministry and the hunting and all the stuff. And so I came and met you, and I'll never forget, it was pouring rain, pouring rain. And your guys were super helpful. I think my bag got lost or something, or didn't make it. And a couple of your crew came and
left on the plane or something like that.
Yeah. It just they didn't make the connection or something. And so your guys were super helpful, but that's when we met. We had an awesome time together. In fact, I've got a picture, I think, on my Instagram of the day we were together. Yeah. And then over the years, we just keep running into each other at hunting. We've been in Nebraska together, I think, once or twice.
Right.
I think you were doing some deer hunting, and I was up there doing some filming for them, and we got to spend a couple days together. And then you've been to Birmingham, all the stuff. Like we keep crossing paths, and you've become a good friend, man. And I really appreciate you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, those are good guys. Just being connected with FA and you, and it's just been a joy to get to know you more and more. And then last year there in Birmingham, just really appreciate who you are, man, and what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you, buddy. And Jeff was on here a few months ago. I
saw it.
Yeah, he was one of our guests. Did a great job. And so I wanted you to be on here because you've got you're really articulate. Of course, you're a preacher, you're a speaker, so you really know how to bring a message across, and you're a great communicator. But we talk about this journey of aging, and we talk about the second chapter of life. And you've had kind of a unique journey, unique to not everybody doesn't have the same as you, but you've kind of branched out in this second chapter, and you are starting a new church. In fact, you guys just launched a month ago or 2 months ago?
Less than 2 months ago, like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago. So why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about that, just so they kind of have a sense of who you are and what you're doing, and then we'll kind of unpack it as we go. But give us a little background.
Well, first of all, I never, ever thought I would start another church. I started New Hope in 2002 and served that church for like 22 years. And it was the ride of my adult life, and absolutely loved it. And then just got to a place, Mark, where I was completely and utterly burned out. Just like stick a fork in me, done. Wasn't enjoying ministry anymore. Wasn't enjoying preaching anymore. I'd come off the stage and go to my office and just collapse and not enjoy. Didn't enjoy loving on people anymore. And I knew the signs were all there. I had to take a break. And so 2019, 20, then COVID hits. And then 2021 were 3 of the hardest years of my life. And didn't know if I was going to make it in ministry, and sometimes didn't know if I was going to make it in life. And I hate to go there right out of the bat, but I think we're going to keep it 100 today and just share openly. Yeah. So I stepped away, and I stepped away for 3 years, and going on 3 years, and got help, got lots of rest, read lots of books and journaled, and just, really tried to get my soul back, doing a lot of soul care, and not ashamed to say therapy, and, you name it. And started feeling like, hey, I'm back, and even started looking at different things to do. Wasn't sure I was going to stay in ministry. And started looking at different opportunities, and kind of felt like the disciples in John's gospel. I think it's in chapter 6 where Jesus looks at him and says, I guess you're going to leave too. People started leaving Jesus, and they said, Lord, to whom shall we go?
Yeah. Where will we go?
Yeah. And so I knew at that point in time that God had still called me. I gave him my life when I was 18 years old. I surrendered to the ministry when I was 19 and a half years old. And I told the Lord wherever he would send me, I would go. So I kind of returned to my calling and was looking at getting a job somewhere at a church. Slingshot, Vanderbloemen, using those guys. And was waiting and wasn't in any hurry. And then in the midst of all of that, God started to bring some people around me. My worship pastor, for example, one of the best worship pastors I had ever hired before in the past, came around me, and some other key leaders, and they just were encouraging, hey, let's pray about this. If you'll lead us, if you'll start another church, we're all in with you. And I thought, what are you smoking? I am at this point in time, I was 54. I am 54 years old. And I had always said, people would ask me all the time over the years, are you going to start another church? And I always said, heck no, I got one in me.
Yeah.
But Mark, it's interesting. I just kind of kept resisting it, but they kept saying, pray. And then, when I made the mistake of saying, okay, I'll pray about it. Started praying about it. And I'm telling you, God just started putting all the different parts of the equation together. And it became unmistakable that God was calling us to start another church. And so earlier in 2025, July to be exact, we started just kind of meeting, and that team grew, and we grew a little core team, what we call the CVT, the core visionary team. And we launched it around Christmas Eve of 2025. So we're less than 2 months old. And
wow.
The good thing is God is confirming every single week that, hey, I told you I wouldn't leave or forsake you. I told you this is what we wanted to do. And we're just blown away. I mean, tons of first-time guests are coming every single week. And we've done absolutely no marketing, I should say. We've done some outreach, but we've done no marketing. Yeah. Whereas 22 years ago, I did all kinds of marketing. We've done none of that. We just kind of said we're going to start meeting and see what God does. And he's showing himself so faithful and good yet again. Yeah. Let's go. By the way, it's called Our Redemption Church.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you.
Yeah. And that comes from Ephesians 1, Mark, Ephesians 1, 7 through 9, where the Bible says, in him, in Jesus, we have redemption through his blood and by the grace. And I love this next part, that he has so lavished on us.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great phrase that God has just lavished us with his grace? And, as we gathered around him, and my story, and I just shared a little bit of it, and that the people on our team have some unique stories, and we all have stories where God has just redeemed some really ugly stuff in our lives, some brokenness, some mistakes. Sure. And so we just got to thinking about that and thinking about what we wanted this church to do, what we felt like God was leading us to do. And that is to offer a place where people, regardless of their story, know that we serve a God who majors in redemption. We serve a God who will take the ugliness, the brokenness, the ashes of our lives, and if we'll let him, he will redeem those things and make a beautiful story. And so thus the name of the church, ORC, Our Redemption Church.
Yeah. I love that, man. You said there's so much gold in all the things you just said. I want to come back to a couple of those things, and I wrote down a note, but we'll come back to. I want to talk about the fact that about calling not going away. One thing we say around here is that there's no expiration date on calling or purpose, and so I want to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, and then we also want to talk about you taking that season of rest and how important that was. I was actually just talking to a guy. My small group, my men's group, meets on Tuesday mornings, and one of my buddies who's part of that was sharing some updates on his life. And he's kind of in a season of rest right now himself between two things, not knowing what the next thing's going to be, but he knows God's still got more for him to do. And he's going to be a guest on here in a few weeks. His name's Rusty Hicks, but we're going to talk about that specifically. But I want to hear from you about that a little bit. But before we get to that, I want to ask you some of the questions we just ask everybody to kind of jump in. And the first one I love is, what was it in your life? What was the moment when you kind of went, I'm a little older than I like to think that I am. What was that aha moment? Michael, John, and Matt, my brothers, were on here, and I know you know them real well. They were talking about eyesight, for example, like the day the readers came out. But what was your moment when you just kind of went, I'm great. I still have a lot of energy. I'm young. I got a lot to do, but I'm a little older. I feel it. What was that for you?
I knew it unmistakably when you invited me to be a part of this podcast.
Yeah. You're not the first person to say that, by the way. In fact, you mentioned just a second ago about Vanderbloem and Search. Well, William Vanderbloem was the first guest on this podcast when we started. And he was a great guest, by the way. Whoever's listening, if you haven't listened to that, watch that episode. It was amazing. But that was exactly what he said. He said, I didn't know I was until you called me.
So all point bulletin, go out to everybody. If Mark Clement invites you to be a part of his podcast, you're usually getting old.
Yeah, you're getting on up there.
Man, I was going to say when the kids started going off to college, that was a clear sign, but I'll go back even a little bit before that. And I don't know why this just came to my mind. I got 5 kids, and I'm so proud of the kids we raised. I've done a lot of things wrong, Mark, but one of the things I did right was my kids were at the top of my priority list. It was God and family and church. And I didn't go out and hang out in the bars. I didn't go out and hang out with the guys, though I love to hunt and fish with guys. I did that, but I always took my kids with me. Kids were part of every part of my life and ministry. And I coached all of them in baseball, basketball, and football. And I'll never forget the youngest, Josh, who's now a sophomore at NC State. I'll never forget the last game I coached, he and his brother, Caleb, before they went to school. I coached them all till they started playing school sports.
Right.
And so I had coached for like 15 years straight because I got 5 kids. And I'll never forget the night that I coached my last game. And the game ended, and I was an emotional wreck. So I told their mom and the kids to just head on to the restaurant, and I'd be there in a little bit because we were going to go out and celebrate. And everybody left the baseball field, and I sat down in the middle of the field, and I wept because I knew that I would no longer be able to coach my kids ever again.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't consider myself old back then, but I was probably, if I just do the math, I guess I was somewhere maybe around 42 or 43, something like that. Then soon after that, got them all through high school. And it's when they started leaving for college, the empty nest, that I started realizing, dang, these years are flying by.
Yeah.
And I'm not, hey, like I said, we're going to keep it 100 today. I didn't do well with empty nest. When I got 5, the first is a girl. She's the only girl, Anna Grace, just got engaged. So her future husband, we were duck hunting together, and he asked me, could he have my daughter's hand in marriage? And it's a sweet, sweet moment because we all loved this guy. But my daughter, when she went off to college here at the University of North Carolina, I was a wreck. And she was she's just 5 minutes down the road. But then because we had so many so close, it was every year or so we would see a kid off. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I guess that's because so much of my identity is in being a dad. Mm. And so that's when I really started to come to terms with it. And it was interesting how quickly you adjust to that, right? How quickly you adjust to the peace and the quiet of the emptiness. Because this last Christmas, just not long ago, they're all home for Christmas with their significant others, with their dogs, and they're in the house. And, Jess and I were adding it up. We had like 27 people in the house for like over the course of 2 weeks, not all at one time, but just over the course. And Mark, I tell you, as we got closer to the end of that and got closer to the new year, I'm walking around thinking, who do these people belong to and when are they leaving?
Right. Man, you're preaching to the choir. You know, Jenda and I have 8 between us. She has 5 and I have 3. And our Christmas is that kind of that same way. They're never all here at once just because there's so many of them and they're so spread out. But yeah, over the course of those 2 weeks, it is like an endless, like it's great and it's super fun, but it is sort of exhausting just in the sense of, you know, because you're just on all the time and they're constantly in and out and they're old enough now. They've been gone long enough that it's not like they just went to school for a little bit and they came back. Like they're gone. They live other places. Yeah. And
I'm joking, you know, I mean,
100%. Yeah. Same. I mean, you know,
there's that play on it. You get so used to the peace and the quiet of the emptiness, but then when they leave and the house goes back to being so quiet, it's hard. I'm ready for grandkids. Like I don't have any grandkids. And so we're thinking, you know, if they all have 2 or 3 grandkids, I'm going to have 15, 20 grandkids. Glory to God. And so I can't wait for that. But that's when it really started to settle in that dang, all the kids are gone. And like I said, I didn't do well with that. And it's very easy for me to slip into some melancholy, some gloom, some, you know, dang, because I so enjoyed raising kids. And so, yeah, that's when it hit me the most.
Okay. Well, you know, this isn't in our pre-show questions that we talked about, but I want to chase a rabbit with you for a second. Yeah. There's been a theme, you know, interviewing people on this subject over the last several months. So this will be episode 31 or 32 when you go live. And identity has come up a good bit for different reasons. You know, men, usually it's work or fatherhood or something like that. Women, it's usually something different. But how have you processed through that? Because knowing how good of a dad you are, knowing how much you loved and cared for your church, and you know, you are a pastor, you are a preacher, like that is a big part of who you are. You know, husband, other parts of your life. How have you worked through identity over the last several years as you processed and had to let some things go? And what's that journey been like for you, and where have you landed?
Oh yeah, that's such a good question. You know, I think as I mentioned, those 3 years that were really, really hard for me, and I took that break and did some therapy and a lot of reading and a lot of journaling through that season. I came to realize that in an unhealthy way, I was too wrapped up in my identity as a pastor. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a pastor of a mega church. And I think there can be a little bit of unhealthy identity with being a dad. And so those things are great in and of themselves, but if they're your chief identity, that's when things get kind of squirrely and messed up. And they did for me. And so part of what I had to really return to, and it's kind of what I said earlier, returning to my calling, even more important than that. And before that, what I had to return to was my identity as a child of the Most High God, an adopted son of God. And I'll take it a step further. My identity as a beloved. You know, what I've always kind of chuckled about was John in the gospel referring to himself as the beloved one, referring to himself in front of the other ones as the one Jesus loves.
The favorite.
And I used to think that is so arrogant and maybe even a little narcissistic. And then I've come to realize actually it's quite beautiful. And I think God longs for his children to live so in their identity as one who is loved by God, so much so that, you know, died on the cross, all that stuff that we know, the gospel, that to be healthy and to be sustained in this crazy thing called life, you kind of have to live in that I'm his. I'm a beloved child of God.
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of extrapolate myself out of some of that pastor identity and dad identity and husband identity. And again, those things are important.
Yeah.
But they are secondary to my identity as a redeemed child of God, who the same guy he saved and redeemed in a 6-by-8-foot jail cell. And my life just came alive. It was dead. It was broken. I was a hell-bound prodigal. And you know my story. Mm-hmm. The same thrill and joy and just life became so bright and beautiful and alive because of that identity. Over years, these other identities try to come in and knock that away and take priority. And so I've had to go back to the identity that I experienced at 18 years old. And as I get older, that becomes the sweetest part of life.
Yeah.
The kids go, marriages are good and struggle, and life is good and struggle, and people let you down, and church is hard, and all those things are just the crazy life that we live. But the one constant, the one anchor is that regardless of whether I'm 18 or 55, he is still my Lord and my Savior, and he loves me, and I'm his beloved child.
Yeah. And, I love that, because I thought you were going to say this, but he loves us just because, not because of what we have done or how we perform, or because you had a mega church, or because you had great kids, or those are, again, great things like you said, but he didn't love you because of that. He loved you before that. He'll love you after that. He loves you during that. And it's such a powerful thing. And also, when we have our identity squarely rooted in him, I think everything else falls into place so much better. Obviously, all second to him, but how he's now I'm showing up as a dad, but as a son of God first, as a dad, or as a pastor who's a child of God. I think it helps us hold those things looser. I think it helps us to avoid what we would call the fear of men. When we're really just trying to please him and him alone. And it's a hard lesson to learn, for sure. We had a guest on a couple months ago named Krista Letson. She's a teaching pastor at a Methodist church up in North Alabama, and really sharp. And she was talking about that, how, you think identity is going to get easier as you get older, but the truth is that struggle is always there, because we're selfish and we're human and in the flesh. I don't know what the root is, but it's a constant struggle, constant reminder of, nope, it's him. No, it's not that. It's him. Just constantly being reminded. And that's why I wanted to ask you about that, because I could feel you had done some work around that, for sure.
Really important, man. Really important. That's so good what you said.
Yeah, well, it really does. I mean, it is the most important thing. It really does set up everything else and helps us keep our priorities in focus, because, like you said, it's so you get out of balance so quickly when that's not the focus. Because now you're playing defense. You're trying to protect. Well, I want to protect my job. I want to protect my ministry. I want to protect my reputation, or what people think of me. I'm worried about. And so it's a very different thing when you're like, no, I just want to please God.
Yep.
Whatever else happens, I just want to please you.
And everything tries to, all the voices of the world and even ministry, everything tries to, uproot that and take that ultimate position in the throne position of your life. And when you get that out of whack, I learned the hard way. It's bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It gets away from you very, very quickly, for sure. Well, you've mentioned again several times, you've talked about that period of rest, and besides identity and the work that you did around identity, what would you say was your biggest takeaway from those 3 years of just kind of setting everything aside and just focusing on God, focusing on yourself and your health and your mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, etc. Besides identity and getting that kind of squared away, what was your other big takeaway, would you say?
Wow, that's another good question. I would say that I had to reach a point where I just don't care anymore what people think.
Yeah.
Isn't that sounds terrible to say?
No. Listen, I think for our age group, the people who are watching this,
yeah,
I think that's one of, in fact, sometimes we'll ask the question, like, what's one of the good things about getting older? And that's been the answer a few times. And it's not like, screw them, I don't care what they think. It's like, I don't need their approval.
Right.
That's the difference.
Yeah. It's like, I don't have any more give a darns. And
nice.
and you know, man, it's people are mean. People can be judgmental. People like to knock you down if they see other people succeeding. I mean, this world that we live in is so polarized, and I'm seeing people are just angry these days. And I used to spend a lot of time worrying about what people thought. And when I say I don't care anymore, like, I genuinely don't care. Because you reach a point, I think, where you see that you're, in the words of Bon Jovi, you're halfway there, and you know, I'm probably a little bit more than halfway there, and you see the finish line, and it's like it doesn't really matter. All that really matters is I stay in that position that we just talked about, that identity position of being just a beloved of God, and that I keep trying to please God with my parenting and with my ministry and all these things. And it doesn't matter, because I've learned it doesn't matter what you do. There are going to be some people who are going to complain and nitpick, and people are going to let you down.
Sure.
And you just gotta let that go. And so I thankfully, I don't really worry about it. I don't spend any time worrying about that anymore.
Yeah. And I think you would agree, you know, like, and you said at the beginning, you know, it sounds harsh. It's really not. It's just that I'm not going to let their stuff affect me, because the truth is, I think when we are around people like that, or we encounter that, and we're all going to it from time to time, they're hurting. There's something going on with them that's making them lash out at us. And obviously we have to be self-reflective. And have I done anything wrong here? Did I hurt anybody's feelings? Did I say something? We're all guilty of that from time to time. But that aside, that self-reflection aside, a lot of times it is their issue. It's not because of anything we did or didn't do. It's their issue. And I know Jen and I talk a lot about trying to see people the way Jesus sees them, see the pain, see the hurt, see the fear. A lot of it's fear-based. They're worried about something else on their side. And so that perspective age really does help that perspective for sure.
Mark, that's so good. I'm sorry for chuckling a minute ago, but you made me think of what happened to me just last week. I pulled up in the Walmart parking lot, and I don't go to Walmart a lot, but nothing will show you the beauty of all of humanity like going to Walmart. Well, I went into Walmart and I returned a blender that I'd bought for my son at Christmas, because he lives in Hawaii now, so he didn't want to take it back. So I said, heck, I'll return it. You go buy one in Hawaii and I'll just Venmo you. I'm coming out of Walmart, and this woman's parked right beside me, and she finishes loading up her car, and she takes her cart and just kind of pushes it out into the parking lot, out of her way, so she can back out and leave.
Wow. Now,
there used to be a time where that would frustrate me, right? And I'm not proud to say there might have been a time when I'd say something to her about it. It's one of my pet peeves. But I kind of just said, oh, well. And I grabbed her cart for her and pushed it over to the place where the cart goes. And she waited on me. And I came back to my car. We parked, and she started fussing at me. She started giving me a hard time for taking her cart back, as if, I guess, she felt guilty and she felt convicted rather me left it. And my point in all of that is, we never know what people are going through.
Yeah.
And so I just tried to bless her and got in my car, and I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere in that conversation. And I rode away thinking, we never know what people are going through. And one of the shifts that I've started to make in my life, and you didn't ask me, but let me just kind of go in this direction for a moment, is I probably, like a lot of people, I could judge people and how dare they and how do you do that? And I've kind of reached a point in my life where I've started operating under the presupposition that most folks are doing the best they can. Now, I know that's not always true, but it helps me love people better.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of, I live now reminding myself, if it's watching the evening news or running into a lady at Walmart, you have no idea what they're going through. They could have just got a medical prognosis that has them scared to death. They could have just, had a spouse walk out on them. They could have a prodigal son. I could go on. You never know what they're going through. And then secondly, which helps me take it to the next level to really try to love people like Jesus did, is I just assume they're probably doing the best they can.
Yeah. And
those things just kind of help me live with a little more grace these days.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of hurting people, let's talk about planting a church.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about calling earlier, and you're talking about how your calling had not gone away. And I love that. I don't think I've ever shared this story on here, but I want to say this. I was just thinking about it as we move into this. When I was very young, I guess I was 19. I had a pretty big. I was in a band, and we had a ministry and a Christian band and doing all the stuff. And I'd had a pretty big moral failure. I won't go into any details, but it wasn't good. And I was repentant and really struggling. And I just thought, I've ruined my whole life. My ministry's over. God's not going to be able to use me. And I remember sitting with my mom, who's now gone on to be with the Lord, but I love this, one of my favorite stories about her. And she's letting me kind of talk about it and vent. And I was crying, and I was just like, I've ruined everything. And I think I've just messed up the call in my life. And she looked at me and she's like, "Who do you think you are?" She's like, how powerful do you think you are that you can take the call of God off of your life? You have nothing to do with that.
Wow.
That's all him. He called you. He knew you were a wreck when he called you. So that's, you're not surprising him any here. And there's nothing you can do to take that calling off of your life. And that stayed with me and will till the day I die. And when you talked about calling, and you said, that doesn't go away. And like we say around here, calling has no expiration date. But there's a big difference between calling and assignment. And so as you were processing that, knowing your calling was intact and knowing that God had a plan for you, whatever that might end up being, but you were open to that assignment. It may not be preaching anymore. It might not be being a pastor. It might not be in ministry. It might be doing something on the secular side or in the marketplace or whatever. How did you process through that? And how do you, going back to identity too, how do you kind of separate those things in your mind so that, calling is one thing, assignment is just secondary. God's going to put me where he's going to put me, but the call, and in your case, I would venture to say your call is to reach people for Christ. I mean, you're an evangelist. I see that all over you, the way you preach and the way you talk. You can do that anywhere. You don't have to do it from a pulpit. So how did you process through that before you made the decision to start a new church?
Yeah. This might not be what you're asking, but I'm just going to go ahead and share it. As I've always, that whole idea of calling an assignment, I understand that part of it. And as I navigated that season, I kind of came to terms with the fact that I don't know that I'm that good at much of anything other than preaching and leading a church. I mean, because I did have some opportunities that came, and as I was trying to sort those things out, I just didn't feel good at much of anything. Now I know my assignment could be preaching in different churches or different parts of the country. But first of all, I just kind of came to the terms with the fact that I don't feel like I'm that good at much, and that's why that whole John 6 thing where Jesus, to whom shall we go? I knew my calling, that God's called me into ministry. And I knew I rediscovered that calling, regardless of where the assignment was going to be, had to involve, preaching this book, studying this book, and preaching this book. I mean, I am at the end of the day a preacher of the gospel. And, I know people don't like in this politically correct day and age, people don't even like to call it preaching anymore. What's your message? Or they try to make that thing more palatable. And no. I am a preacher. I am a preacher of the gospel. And so I don't know if that's what you're asking, but I knew the assignment could be anywhere. But I knew for me that my assignment will always involve preaching. And I love what you said earlier. I'm going to steal this one. Your calling doesn't have an expiration date. That's so good, because this is why I know that I don't think I'll ever really retire. I might stop full-time ministry one day, but as long as God puts breath in these lungs, I'm going to preach. And, over there in Acts 13, somewhere around verse 35 or 36, the Bible says King David served God's purpose in his generation, and then he died. It's kind of a morbid thought, but I've always thought it's a great verse. It's a great verse to put on a tombstone. King David served the purposes of God in his generation and died. And I feel like that's what I hope to do. I'm just going to keep preaching. And if I get paid for it, I get paid for it. I'm sure there'll come a day when I don't. But if God still lets me walk on this earth with a cane or in a wheelchair and somebody invites me to preach, dadgummit, I'm going to show up and do my best and preach. And so that's how I navigated returning to my call. And the assignment was, I was open, like, Lord, wherever. Like I said earlier, I said to God when I was 19 years old, I was driving across the state of South Carolina in a 1978 blue Toyota Tercel that was rusted out on the bottom on each side of the car. And it's one of those cars. You ever had one of those cars when you try to turn it off, it doesn't turn off. It just kind of rattles on for another 20 or 30 seconds. You ever been in one of those?
Yeah, mine was a Datsun.
And I would drive all over the state of South Carolina, often not paid a dime, just to be able to share my testimony and preach this glorious gospel of Jesus to high schools and churches and, wherever people wanted me to go, I would go. And I kind of feel like, now all these years later, I'm right back there in that same place. Doesn't matter, God, what it takes or what it costs or what it doesn't cost or what it pays and what it doesn't pay. I feel blessed to be able to try to utter the words of grace and truth to God's people. Yeah.
Well, I will say this. I think, well, I hear you, and I think you're right. You are called to preach. There's no doubt. You could be a good salesperson, though. If you had to, you could sell anything. Because I can see you right now taking guys hunting and all the stuff that salespeople like. You're just selling Jesus now. But the truth is, I think you can sell anything if you had to.
I'm not going to deny that. I think I know who I am. I agree with that. But here's the difference. I would not be content.
No, you wouldn't.
I really think at the end of the day, God saved this hellbound prodigal to preach the gospel. Just in the same way he knocked Paul off that horse, Saul to Paul, and said, preach the gospel. That's kind of my thing. And so as I thought about doing some of those other things, I knew I would be miserable, and I was already miserable. I was trying to find a way out of being miserable.
Yeah, for sure. So you're making this decision, you're in your 50s, you're like, hey, we're going to start a new church, and God's led you to that and all the things that you said earlier. But we were talking offline before we started recording, we both know how hard it is to start a church, to plant a church. It's a young man's game typically. And I've shared on here in several different places over the last several months about when I started my new company after leaving Highlands College. It was that same thing. It's like, I can do it, but do I really want to do it? Like, I know how hard it's going to be. I know how hard I'm going to have to work. And so, and like you, I knew I wasn't gonna be happy doing anything else. So God led me back to that, and it's been awesome. But I'm sure there was some trepidation, like, but some questions that you had to ask. So what was that process like for you? What were some doubts that you had, and how did you overcome that to ultimately start a new church?
Yeah, the doubts were definitely related to, did I really want to get back in that saddle again? I knew what it involved.
Because it certainly would have been easier for you to go on staff somewhere. That would have been the easier thing to do.
Absolutely. And so I really wrestled with that. When I say we prayed and wrestled with that for a long time, we decided in July, basically, that we were going to do this. We didn't announce it till like October or November of 2025. But for that year prior to that, I was wrestling with that, even as I was working with Vanderblumen and Slingshot a little bit, and getting fillers out there. I was still praying about it. And so after I really felt called to do it, and made the decision to go in that direction, the wrestling didn't stop, because I knew what could be. I want to be careful how I say this. I knew what could happen and the work that could be involved. And Mark, I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to die on the sword again. I've dealt with burnout a few times in my life, not as bad as this last one, 2019 to 2021, but probably in about 2014 or 15, I hit a wall again. And I remember, this goes way back. Some people might remember this. So I remember when Andy Stanley did a sermon series called Choosing to Cheat. And his whole point with, as he was leading Northgate, was he had to reach a point where he decided this is what he could give North Point. This is what he could give God in that church. And he knew that if he was going to cheat somebody, he was going to cheat somewhere. And he found himself cheating his wife and his kids. And he went through a tough season, it sounded like. And so he made a conscious decision that, hey, God, this is what I'm going to give North Point. And I'm okay with you growing it based on that. And I kind of came into this launch, this church plant, with that realization. I'm going to give, and we have two campuses. What we haven't talked about yet was, and you know this, there's a church right down the road called Merritt's Chapel, a beautiful, picturesque country church out by Jordan Lake, where they didn't have a pastor, and they asked me to be their pastor. And I took that as an interim position while I was still looking. And through that whole journey, felt called to start ORC. And lo and behold, this church got together and went through a long season of discernment and prayer. And they decided to be a part of ORC. They decided to be one of our campuses.
Okay.
And so we launched with two campuses.
Okay.
And so that adds another layer of complexity and workload to this, right? But my point is, I have come into this so far, and I'm doing this where I've decided, here's what I'm going to give the church. And it's full time. Don't get me wrong. It's full time and some, but it's not some of those stupid hours I used to work when I was at New Hope. Here's what I'm going to give the church. Here's what I'm giving to my wife. Here's what I'm going to do to try my best to still stay dialed in and connected with my children. And you said it earlier. Here's what I'm going to do to hunt and fish. Right, what y'all can't see is my black lab sleeping right here beside me, named Abby. And we're duck hunting fools. I mean, duck season just ended. What you don't know is I'm dealing with duck depression right now. Duck season just ended January 31st. And I own a house with 3 other guys down on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and we've got 6 different duck impoundments that we hunt on a rotating basis. And so, I'm going to hunt. Maybe this is what comes with age too. It's some of that I don't care stuff. I'm going to hunt. I'm going to fish. I'm going to travel with my wife. I'm going to stay dialed in with my kids who are now scattered all over this world. And and I'm going to pastor. I'm going to preach. I'm going to lead. I'm going to serve the church, but I'm not going to do it 90, 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy, I'm going to enjoy slower mornings with coffee and the word. And I like to journal and journaling. And you just get to a point where you realize, man, life is too short and it's getting shorter. And if I don't learn to do this thing at a sustainable pace, I'm toast. And so that's kind of how I came into this. And less than 2 months in, I'm proud to say I'm doing well with that. I'm working hard. I don't want anybody to mishear me. I'm working hard. But you know what? I'm going to bed earlier than I've ever gone to bed. I'm trying to prioritize sleep. Man, I went through a season where I didn't sleep well. Yeah. And I am learning so much how important sleep is. Jess, my wife, calls it the sleep chamber. And so we do all these little things to go to bed at a regular time and temperature cold and all these things. I'm just trying to do it different this time, Mark. And because I learned that I can't bless people and I can't serve people and I can't preach good sermons. And I'm a sorry pastor if I'm not healthy. Yeah. You can't pour out of an empty cup. Yeah. And so I'm just really more committed to that than ever. And as a result, loving ministry and loving family and marriage and life like I used to just dream of.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was thinking that the whole time you were talking about that. I was like, I'm sure your church may or may not grow as fast or may not be as whatever.
Might not be a mega church. I don't care.
But who cares? Yeah. You're going to be a better leader, a better pastor because you're healthy, because you're happy, because you're rested, because you're showing up with a full cup, like you said. It makes all the difference in the world. And I think so many times in all careers, ministry is really guilty of this, but it really is across the board with men, especially. There's that mindset of the grind, and I've got to put in X number of hours, and I'll sleep when I'm dead, and all the stuff that people say. But the truth is, there's so much more on the side of taking care of yourself. Even when it comes to the Sabbath and honoring the Sabbath and taking a day of rest, and we could talk about that for hours. But all that stuff speaks to how effective we are in the thing that God has called us to do. And Jesus was such a great model of that. He was always going off in the woods by himself, and always, I don't know if you watch The Chosen or not, but one of my favorite things about that show is how they're always like, where is he?
Yeah, it's great. And Jess watches it and she gets me to try to watch it, and I watch it some with her. Yeah, he would always go off to the mountains. But again, people, like, as I'm starting this new thing, a lot, the most common thing I hear as people come up is oh, here we go again. God's going to grow this thing. It's going to be another mega church. And I don't know if they believe me yet, but I literally look at them and say, I don't know. It might not, guys. And I don't care. Here's what we need to try to do. Let's just be faithful. A part of me, I'm not so, who cares whether it's shiny and polished and all that stuff that comes with the mega church. I don't care about that anymore. Like, I really don't. I want to pastor people. That's what got me in a bad place, Mark, is I started leaving my calling. I'm a pastor and a preacher. And New Hope got so big that all I was doing was putting out fires and leading staff. I didn't get to pastor people anymore. I didn't enjoy preaching anymore. So, you
became the CEO. You were a CEO instead of a pastor. Yeah.
So I don't know that I want that again, to be honest with you. I want to reach people. Don't get me wrong. Cut me and I bleed evangelism. I want to reach people, but I don't care about mega church anymore. I just care about being faithful and being healthy and enjoying ministry again.
100%. Yeah, that's so good. Well, let me ask you this as we're kind of getting toward the end here. So many questions I want to ask you, and maybe we'll do this again sometime, but I'd like to end with asking you, on this journey that you've been on, and you've alluded to some things that we haven't had time to get into, but you do have a phenomenal testimony that I'd love for people to hear sometime. But through all the ups and downs and the trials and the tribulations and all the change and things that have happened, and now you're starting this new thing, and what have you learned about God that you didn't know before? Like, what is your relationship with him like now? And what's important to you in that versus where it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago? How's your faith grown and changed?
Yeah. Well, we've already talked about it a little bit. I've coming to know and understand more and more and more that he is just a good Heavenly Father. I spent a lot of my early years wrestling with a gaping father wound that I had coming up as a kid. I grew up in a very, very broken, dysfunctional family. I mean, like capital D dysfunctional. And just as I return in these years of just returning to God, I'm just growing more and more and more into this. I am his beloved. He is my Heavenly Father, and all that means. The second thing is I'm continuing to learn, and with this comes great relief. I'm continuing to learn that God is he's just faithful. I know we say it and it sounds like such a cliche, but it's one of the reasons why I was able to start this church after I wrestled with all that is he's faithful. He is faithful. And the beautiful thing about as you age and you really see God show up time and time and time again, you learn, or at least I've been learning to not stress out and freak out over the small stuff anymore, not to sweat the details, because, hey, you've seen him be faithful so many times before. He's going to be faithful again. Yeah. And so as a result, I don't, and this is might sound hard for some people to believe, but all I can do is be, 100% honest with you today. I don't worry much about anything anymore. My precious wife, God bless her, she worries about everything. She called me. She's down in Memphis visiting her family right now, and she called me to let me know that she was pulling into a gas station to get gas in case something happened. And I said, honey, you can't live like that. You can't live worried that something's going to. And she just wants me to know, and that was sweet. But I don't worry about much of anything anymore, Mark. Even death. Like, I think that God has organized this whole thing such that if we live lives for him and we do serve him, as you get older, you get more tired. You see your body changing. And if we really believe what we believe about heaven, that's going to be the cherry on top. Right? That's going to be the good stuff. And I know, in the words of Brad Paisley, that great country singer, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go today, but I don't even worry about death anymore. Like, yeah. I'm just, and again, maybe some of this is unhealthy. I'll let you tell me later. Maybe my give a darns they're totally gone, and I don't worry. I don't worry about those kinds of things anymore. And I just trust God. And as a result, I'm more at peace than I've ever been. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to be said for full dependence on the Father,
Yeah.
And as men, especially, it's easy to say, I got it. I'll take care of it. Okay. God, thank you for get me here, but now I got it, And there's a reality of it's real easy to get distracted by those things and to get our priorities out of order, like we talked about over and over again in this conversation. But I think when you get to that place of peace and you really are able to relax into him and trust him that he really does have it, there's the word that I feel like Spirit's kind of put in my mind right now is freedom. There's so much freedom when you don't have those cares, you don't have those concerns. It's not that you're being irresponsible. It's not that you're being a poor steward of things. Or there's a place for all of that. Absolutely. And there are things that we care about, but not worrying, not being fearful, not stressing over stuff, not trying to control everything. That is by and large going to always fall in the healthy category. because you're really trusting him to, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to work hard. Like you said, I'm going to do everything I'm responsible for. I'm going to do everything I can, the best I can. But ultimately, you've got to show up, and you have got to do what you're going to do. And I'm going to trust that, and I'm not going to worry about that for sure. Well, the last thing I want to ask you is just as we're kind of signing off here, for the people who are watching, people like us, 50 plus, 50, 60, 70s, whatever they are, who may be on the fence, maybe trying to figure out what God wants them to do. Maybe they're trying to get psyched back up again to start a new thing or whatever. And I'm preaching this to them all the time because this is the whole point. Like, God has something for you to be doing with the resources that you have. I'd love for you just to kind of talk straight to them and just say, hey, let me encourage you. Let me challenge you. What would you say to everybody who's out there, who's thinking, what does God have for me to do?
I would say, anchor yourself as much as you can into the gospel of Jesus. As you were talking earlier, just right before that, and you were talking about, you were going off of what I was saying about just peace and freedom and resting in that. This world is just cray-cray, Mark. It's at a feverish pitch of just being a crazy place. The political structures are crazy. The world is crazy. And the storms are raging. And it surprises so many of us. And yet again, in this book, it really shouldn't surprise us. Everything this book says is going to happen is happening. And so I would say that as your listeners are experiencing the storms of this world, the only way I have found to be able to navigate those storms is to anchor myself to Christ. There's that great verse in the New Testament where Paul says, we do not grieve as those without hope. This anchor that this gospel provides is the only thing that I have found that enables me to live this peace that you're talking about, this steady, this hope in eternity is just continuing to drive into that identity we were talking about earlier, to continue to drive into the gospel. And whatever field you're in, or whatever calling you have, or maybe you're called to just live in the corporate world. God needs great Christians everywhere to be in different vocations. But whatever it is that you're doing, and however it is that you're living, and whatever storms you're trying to navigate, hold on fast. And I don't mean just like, I go to church. And no, I mean like hold on fast to the hope of the gospel. Just dive maybe more deeply than you ever have before into the gospel, and watch that get you through these storms and give you this peace that we're talking about. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean there aren't hard storms. He tells us in the Sermon on the Mount, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. But just anchor yourself in Jesus, not religion, not church, Jesus. And he is the one who gets us through. And at least that's been my experience, which is why I'm right here where I started at the age of 18. I have nowhere else to go. I have nothing else to do but to try to live this life in him. And that's what I would encourage him. I know it sounds like the thing the preacher would say. Yeah. But I've found it, and I found it to be true, not as a preacher in the last 3 or 4 years. Remember, I took a 3-year break. I found it in just being Benji and returning to my first love. Yeah. Yeah, man, that's so good. And I love when you see somebody who's dialed in and doing the thing that God's called them to do, and being faithful with that, you can see, and I see it in you. I see the energy, the passion, the excitement. Like, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're giving it everything that you've got. And there's so much joy in just watching someone who's kind of dialed in alignment with what God has for them to do. And you're really modeling that for all of us. Man, I just want to applaud you and appreciate
what you're doing. I appreciate your faithfulness to come on today and talk about it and share your testimony and talk about those things, but also just how you're modeling for all of us who are a little bit wiser, a little bit more mature, a little bit grayer. You're saying, hey, we got a lot left to do, and now's not the time to shrink back, but it's time to lean in, and the joy and the fun and the excitement of that is evident in you, and I want that for all of us. So, man, thank you so much for being on here today.
Yeah, well, to Him be the glory, Mark. And I honor you, man. I've always admired you and your brother MJ. Love your family. I've heard such stories of your parents, and you mentioned your mom earlier, and she was right a long time ago, brother. Who do you think you are to second guess the calling? What wise words from a mom. And here you are still stewarding over it well, and you have been all these years, and excited about your podcast, brother. And let me know if there's any way I can serve you in the days ahead, and hope to see you in Birmingham this summer.
Me too, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. Love you, bro.
Love you.
Bye-bye.